Oops. Hi, folks. Thank you for being patient while I shared. Seems like it's easier sharing things in Facebook now. At least I can share to a lot more people. But on the other hand, when I do that, it takes me a little longer to share. So I'm very glad to be here. I'm very glad that you're here. Hope you're having a good evening. Hi, Dolores. Hi, Kay. Thank you for sharing. Kay, thank you for sharing, Dolores. Thank you for Kay. Thank you for sharing, Kay. Avro, here you are. Been hunting for the Knights of Live Screen. Greetings. Hope everyone is doing well. Yeah, I hope everyone is doing well too. We are doing well, except in the place that we live, they seem to be having increasing trouble with leaks of the water. We often find that they've shut off the hot water or that they're shutting off the water in the morning entirely in order to fix it. But it's getting to be a problem. Anyway, Steve Wolfbrand says hello. Hello, Steve. Thank you for liking and sharing the promo. That was very nice of you. Okay, there are a lot of things to go over tonight. I will try to only hit the very high spots on those things. I want to paint a picture. Uh, okay, to me, the picture really pulls my chain, um, makes me think, reinforces the view that uh, certainly there should be no more waiting. We have to play our game now. We have to play the progressive game. We're getting no cooperation from Joe Biden at all. Okay, as far as I can see. Hi, Deborah. Yeah, I don't know why I didn't come to you. Are you in the public purpose chat group, Deborah? Try to find the public purpose chat group, okay, and register for that. Okay, or register for Joseph's work team, and then you'll also be informed, I think. Anyway, it's great to see you. Uh, so, anyway, as I was saying, what this is all meaning for me is that we need to pursue the external strategy from the Democratic Party. The only thing that's going to turn Biden, if anything, is going to turn him, is uh, huge numbers of people registering for the People's Party, and for that to somehow get tracked by the mainstream press. It may take some time for that to happen, but I think between now and 2022, if we're vigorous enough, it's possible for the movement for a People's Party, or the People's Party now, it's the People's Party now, to actually develop a following sizable enough to begin to scare the Democrats. I think the only thing that's going to move them is fright from a group on their left that is eating their lunch. We have to begin to eat on their lunch. As I go through the various articles, that impression will grow stronger and stronger. This is about eating their lunch. Okay, so first, a column by Norman Solomon from Common Dreams. Let me share that for you. Share screen. called some liberals and arms control experts are cheering for war profiteers to be in Biden's cabinet. What does all this praising and access drooling amount to? Here's a picture of one Michelle Flournoy, President, Center for New American Security, speaks during a conference on the transition of the U.S. presidency from Obama to Trump at the U.S. Institute of Peace in Washington, D.C., January 10th, 2017. Anyway, Michelle Flournoy is currently the favored person, the favored candidate, to be picked for Biden's defense secretary. She's also the founder of West Exec Advisors, co-founder of that. The other co-founder is Tony Blinken, who has been announced as Biden's choice for Secretary of State. So the Secretary of State and the Secretary of Defense will both come from the same company. And the Director of National Intelligence, who's Avril Haines, who has been announced already as Biden's pick, has also joined West Exec Advisors. And anyway, West Exec is currently doing some financial deals with strategic partners in the market so that it will profit from the fact that 3 of its top people may be going into the administration if they are confirmed. These people are to quote the article by Solomon, are spinning through revolving doors to a broker lucrative Pentagon contracts. It's not a conflict of interest, people are claiming, as though advocating for an aggressive U.S. military posture is fine. It's an insidious process helping to set low standards for the incoming administration. And enablers now extol potential cabinet picks who've combined pushing for continuous war and hugely expensive new weapon systems with getting rich as deal makers for the military-industrial complex. And this article goes through the history of Flournoy and Blinken teaming up during the Trump administration to start their new business and getting very lucrative contracts. From the top of the influential and well-heeled Plowshares Fund, which is obviously a fund supposedly for peace, Joe Cirincione and Tom Collina have jumped onto the Flournoy bandwagon. Days ago, Cirincione proudly tweeted news coverage of the, quote, open letter on our support for Michelle Flournoy to be the next Secretary of State, which he had signed along with Collina and 27 other, quote, nuclear experts, unquote. Other signatories of the open letter included Rachel Bronson, the president and CEO of the Bulletin of the Atomic Scientists. They, of course, have been around for a very long time, since the 1940s, anyway, for a very long time. As recently as the 1960s, they seemed to be quite a radical organization, not at all corrupt, at that time. But, of course, there have been many intervening years between. Anyway, this open letter was signed by Bronson, as well as the Arms Control Association's board chair, Tom Countryman, and executive director, Darrell Kimball. Former Defense Secretary William Perry also signed. Cirincione's tweet touting the pro-Flournoy open letter ran into pushback from longtime peace activist a lady by the name, of Marcy by Winograd, who tweeted back, quote, Joe, please read her essay, quote, How to Prevent the War in Asia, unquote, which should be retitled, How to Start a War in Asia. Did you know, I'm quoting now, she wants to continue to send, quote, defensive, unquote, weapons to Saudi Arabia while we pivot to the South China Sea and more war games next to two nuclear powers. The reply from Cirincione offered a little more than wishful thinking about Flournoy. Quote, I disagree with many of the positions she's taken in the past. She is, however, the best qualified candidate for the position, the one most likely to implement serious changes should President Biden order them. Dems have also moved away from the Clinton policies she favored. But if she still favors them and Biden appoints her, then isn't she going to have a lot to do with what President Biden is going to order? I say, or I ask. Going on. While Flournoy has awaited on whether she'll get the nod from Biden for the Pentagon, Tony Blinken is already the nominee for Secretary of State. Oddly, two of Blinken's most high-profile progressive boosters for the job have worked in key roles for Bernie Sanders, a leader second to none in challenging corporate greed. Faiz Shakir, the campaign manager for Sanders' latest presidential campaign, tweeted that the selection of Blinken was a, quote, solid choice, unquote. Well, I think Faiz was a campaign manager for Bernie, but I don't think that he was the most progressive person in the Bernie Sanders campaign by a long shot. And the top Sanders foreign policy advisor in the Senate, Matt Duss, declared, quote, this is a good choice. Tony has the strong confidence of the president-elect and the knowledge and experience for the important work of rebuilding U.S. diplomacy. Also be a new and great thing to have a top diplomat who is regularly engaged with the progressive grassroots, unquote. When is he engaged with the progressive grassroots? When has Tony Blinken talked to Medea Benjamin? When has he talked to David Swanson? When has he talked to Kevin Zissou or Margaret Flowers? When has he talked to the progressive grassroots? When has he talked to the gray zone people? That's a common rationale for supporting potential cabinet members, despite the fact that their records and policy prescriptions are contrary to progressive principles. In effect, we're supposed to be grateful and mollified that at least they talk with us. And then he asks, what does all this praising and access drooling amount to? And Winograd gave an assessment of that, which Norman Solomon, thinks is a cogent assessment. She says, quote, progressives may be tempted to trade truth for access to the powerful and privileged, thinking they can influence the course of events if they bite their tongue when Flournoy talks of fighting and prevailing in a war with China. But this sort of thinking is misguided. The power progressives hold must be wielded now before it's too late, before Flournoy is crowned and the U.S. slips further into decline, mired in the high-stakes, high-tech arms race, or worse, another endless war, this one with a nuclear-armed nation of over 1.3 million people. Then there's lots of disturbing information, or at least there's a reference to disturbing information, but concerning Blinken and Flournoy and their friends. Outside the Beltway bubble, grassroots groups are organizing to put up a fight against the nominees who have repeatedly pledged and shown their allegiance to the warfare state. And Norman Solomon finishes this with something I think we need all to keep in mind. Joe Biden's historic value was to defeat Donald Trump. Um, uh, uh, and progressives played a vital role in that defeat, while often being candid about the many awful parts of the Biden record. Now, progressives should emphatically challenge every odious aspect of the Biden administration, every step of the way. Yes, I could not agree more. That is our job now, and we have to get to it. So, let's go on to the next piece. You've heard about the nomination of Janet Yellen for Secretary of Treasury. Well, Robert Kuttner at the Prospect, the American Prospect, that is, has some things to say about that. Trouble at Treasury. This is an article by Kuttner on November 30th, 2020. And he points out there's a question. Is Yellen going to be the master in her own house? Who will control the important sub-cabinet positions like the Undersecretary for International Affairs, the key regulatory posts, and the IRS Commissioner? He says the early signs are not auspicious. Almost lost in the welter of top economic jobs leaped to the Times, the Post, and the Wall Street Journal by the transition staff on Sunday was an unfamiliar name. Okay, the name came Adewale Adeyemo, also known as Wally Adeyemo. He is a man who emigrated from Nigeria to the United States and who has educated and worked his way into high circles in the Democratic Party. Kuttner says if he's typical of what's coming, we can expect what the Biden team gives progressives with one hand, they may take away with the other. And that's assuming that Yellen is progressive, by the way. He's assuming that. Some would disagree with that or have doubts about how progressive she is. Adeyemo, 39, came to the U.S. as a child from Nigeria with his parents. He excelled in school, graduating from the University of California and then Yale. While at Yale, he was in law school at Yale. He worked in the Obama campaign. He joined the administration while still in his late 20s, the Obama administration, working for then Treasury Secretary Tim Geithner. One red flag for progressives is the fact that after leaving government, he followed a well-worn path of Obama of Obama alums seeking to cash in and went to Wall Street. Not just anywhere on Wall Street. He went to BlackRock, the world's largest financial firm with $7 trillion under management, where he served as a political advisor and for a time as chief of staff to CEO Larry Fink. Adeyemo, begins with a conflict of interests, and Fink's top priority is to prevent BlackRock from being designated as a systemically important financial institution, okay, or SIFI, the kind of organization we might normally call a systemically dangerous a financial institution, okay, an SDFI, which would subject it to a higher level of regulatory scrutiny. The Treasury is the key player on this decision. and scores of others that affect BlackRock's business model. How convenient of them to have placed Wally Adeyemo as a likely appointee for undersecretary. And did Yellen really okay that? Does she really want that? That's a question. There are more red flags. Before joining the Obama administration, he worked at the Hamilton Project. That's the outfit housed at Brookings and created and underwritten by Robert Rubin, the gray eminence of the Clinton administration, to promote a very centrist and Wall Street friendly brand of watered down liberalism, otherwise known as neoliberalism. I added that last comment. Adeyemo subsequently worked for Treasury Secretary Jack Lew as his deputy chief of staff in 2015. Lew is another Rubin protege and probably the most effective one when it came to squeezing surpluses and reductions of the deficit in both the Clinton administrations and the Obama administrations. In between Lew's two stints of government, he was chief operating officer at Citigroup, where Rubin was a top executive. Yes. And Lew is, by the way, the most competent person at what he does, which is managing a budget, keeping track of it, knowing all the ins and outs and all the loopholes, and squeezing everything. He is the austerity king when it comes to operations. Now, I'm not always saying that he's always for austerity. He's not talking that way right now, in particular. But I'm saying if you want to manage austerity, in an efficient way, the man you normally call in, the master, is Jack Lew. Why does Rubin turn up just about everywhere and launching and promoting the careers of the wrong kind of Democrat? That's not just a rhetorical question, but a deeply structural one, if you want to understand the corruption and political failures of the Democratic Party, says Kuttner. Following his post to Treasury, Adeyemo took a version of the key international economics post once held by Rubin protege Michael Froman, serving on both the National Security Council and the National Economics Council as the international economics chief. He was a key negotiator on the late and little lamented Trans-Pacific Partnership, the brainchild of Froman, and the quintessence of the corporate brand of free trade deal, the neoliberal perfect free trade deal. That's what we're talking about here. The deal that I wrote a book about, and the deal that figured very prominently in a second book on trade, that I wrote, both of which you'll find on my website, with links to Amazon, Kindle books. From there, he went to BlackRock. After 2 years at BlackRock, he became, guess what, the first president of the Obama Foundation. How fitting, right? His trajectory offers a perfect rendition of the Washington Wall Street revolving door. Can we imagine Adeyemo urging tougher regulation of BlackRock? Here the plot thickens, for there is one anomalous green flag in Adeyemo's career. I don't know how green this flag is, but green flag anyway. His cordial I guess as in racing, there's green flags and there's red flags. His cordial relationship with Elizabeth Warren. After the Dodd-Frank Act passed in 2010, it included Warren's creation, the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau. Warren was designated as the interim chair Geithner assigned Adeyemo to work with Warren as the Bureau's executive director, probably to serve as a check on Warren, the way he was appointed or is going to be appointed now to serve as a check on Janet Yellen, right? Warren and Adeyemo have maintained a good relationship, and I've confirmed with Warren's staff that she will support his nomination to Treasury. Well, that would seem to be very significant, but we've also heard that she's going to support the appointment we'll talk about later, okay, of Neera Tanden, okay, as well. So I guess it doesn't take much to get her to support an appointment. But anyway, Kuttner is considering this a sign of Warren having a good relationship, okay, with uh, 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 with Adeyemo. So we would likely get a number two at Treasury on close terms with two opposites, Larry Fink and Elizabeth Warren. I guess one question we might ask, are they really opposites? Are they really so opposite? That might be a question for another day. Anyway, what Kuttner thinks is that Adeyemo thus personifies the core split in the Biden administration. We'll see how he straddles it. But back to Yellen, will she be steamrolled by the Wall Street-friendly senior people in Biden's inner circle in terms of who actually controls the Treasury Department? But Yellen's background in government is at the Fed. Next to the Supreme Court, the Fed is the most autonomous branch of the government. When she was there, she could run the place, subject only to keeping a working majority of the Fed's other governors. She didn't need White House permission, and the White House did not impose senior staffers. The choreography and sub-cabinet appointments to cabinet departments is more ambiguous. Strong Treasury secretaries, such as Bob Rubin, him again, are clearly masters in their own houses. Nobody imposed sub-cabinet officials on Rubin. Weaker secretaries end up being in charge of a department they don't entirely control. As a veteran of executive branch politics and policies, and as a former aide to two Treasury secretaries, Geithner and Jack Lew, Adeyemo knows the department far more intimately than Yellen. And still to be filled are several key undersecretary and assistant secretary posts. So far, Larry Fink of BlackRock has scored two key posts at the very top of the Biden administration. Brian Deese as head of the National Economics Council, and Adeyemo at Treasury. The head of the National Economic Council is a very, very key post because all the other people who are on the council are heads of departments usually. There usually aren't any other economists on the council, except perhaps the Secretary of the Treasury. Okay. Now, Deese is not that well known as an economist. He's not a top economist. He's not a Nobel Prize winner. He's not an economics star. He's a BlackRock star. That's what he is. I'm not sure Deese has been formally announced as the head yet. Still possible we might get someone else at the last minute. Hopefully somebody like Joe Stiglitz. But there hasn't been a hint of that. There's been a lot of scuttlebutt that it's going to be Brian Deese. And maybe it has been announced and I simply missed it. Like the Democratic Party, Adeyemo is an ambiguous figure. He could be yet another Wall Street fox in the Treasury chicken coop. Or like Yellen, he could be a Warren ally, maybe both. If he's a Warren ally, even if he's a Warren ally, that might be not that hopeful for our side, because in the end, Warren always caves to the establishment. But Kuttner asks, what sort of person works for both Liz Warren and Larry Fink? And then he says, we will soon find out. So let's stop right there. Adeyemo, Wally is one character we need to keep our eyes on. Watch carefully, and more carefully. Wally Adeyemo, Undersecretary of the Treasury. And a piece from Dave Dayen at the Prospect. A bright spot amid Biden's middle-of-the-road approach, this was on November 30th also, on antitrust and big tech. Advocates changed the conversation. I'm sorry, I sort of screwed that one up. What did I do? Oh, I clicked on something. I haven't clicked on it now. There we go. On antitrust and big tech, advocates changed the conversation. That has invalidated the same old corporate-friendly personnel. So that's interesting. So what Dave is saying here is that over a period of years, the conversation about Silicon Valley has changed. And in the larger culture and larger society, there's a fear now and concern over antitrust issues when it comes to Silicon Valley. So those sharp-minded tech titans offered a name to the Biden transition, says Dave, but here they might have gotten a little too obvious. They suggested Karen Dunn, a partner at Paul Weiss, Paul Weiss, at Rifkin, Wharton, and Garrison, to become the Assistant Attorney General for Antitrust, another key sub-cabinet post. Okay, the division of the Justice Department, but managing the Google case, and one or two key agencies for antitrust, the other being the Federal Trade Commission. Dunn, a former associate White House counsel under Obama, has a long list of corporate clients, but representing Uber, Apple, and Oracle. Most recently, she literally prepped Amazon CEO Chief Jeff Bezos for his testimony before the House Antitrust Subcommittee. Now, the cynical assumption would be that Dunn would immediately be fast-tracked for the job. But that's not what happened. According to three sources close to the matter, Dunn was quickly and summarily shot down by the Biden transition team. And then Dave says, for nearly 50 years, President-elect Biden has placed himself squarely at the center of the Democratic Party, and many of his early selections for cabinet agency staff have reflected that. He could have chosen deficit hawk Bruce Reed to run OMB. Instead, he chose Neera Tanden, notorious for tweeting entirely too much, but not in the same league as Reed on austerity. Now, Dave, of course, is very well aware of Neera Tanden's record when it comes to Social Security, and we'll talk about that somewhat later. But in spite of that, she's not the same as Reed when it comes to austerity, as witnessed by a recent paper she co-authored with Heather Bucci, okay, I should say, and Fred Greenstein, and one other person, I forget who, at the Committee for Budget and Policy Priorities, which is a center-left type, okay, of think tank, which also was the resting place for Jared Bernstein. But it's probably still the resting place because Jared hasn't been appointed to the Council, okay, of Economic Advisors yet, though he is a pick before that. Anyway, that piece advocated for deficit spending as the thing to do right now. So Neera Tanden is not in the austerity camp right now. Dave also points out she may not have much chance at being confirmed. And Dave points out he could have chosen the phenomenal economist Lisa Cook to chair the Council of Economic the Council of Economic Advisors. He could also have chosen the very, very good economist Derek Hamilton, or he could have chosen the excellent economist Stephanie Kelton to chair the Council of Economic Advisors as well. I add those two names, but instead went with the slightly more center-left Cecilia Rouse from Princeton, who is, she seems mostly to be in economics, specializing in the area of education, with an emphasis on the relationship of education to the labor market, as far as I've been able to infer from her writings. She doesn't look like much of a macro economist to me. Well, what we most need today is macro economists on the Council of Economic Advisors, given the current problems we have. Okay. Anyway, two economists who are preferred by progressive Jared Bernstein and Heather Bushey will round out the CEA. Now, I think both Jared Bernstein and Heather Bushey are good people, but in the words of one of my books, Volume 1 of Real Fiscal Responsibility, to be specific, these particular progressives, in the past at least, have generally been practitioners of the progressive give-up formula, as I have called it, which is to say they have played the game from time to time of trying to craft deficit reduction packages that were somehow lefty. In other words, that emphasized spending on the right things, but doing pay-fors for the spending. So then getting into arguments with some more centrist people, about, well, let's do tax cuts, for stimulus, and God knows what else to compromise with right-wing economists and centrist economists. So now lately they've been more aggressive because the whole raft of economists, is more aggressive. They're panicked over the state of the economy right now, and they want spending. And Jared and Heather Bushey also want spending. What would, I think, tend to distinguish them from other economists is that they are very concerned about the inequality in the American system. And also, in Jared's case, he has written with Dean Baker, a book on the job guarantee. It's a more conservative book on the job guarantee than, let's say, Pavlina Cherneva's book, on the job guarantee. Other works on the job guarantee by Bill Mitchell, and some other Economists, certainly a much more conservative book. And by the way, it doesn't have a living wage of $15 an hour, or at least it did not. It had a lower wage. I wouldn't call it a living wage. I think it was something like 12 or $11 an hour in their book. But anyway, they're going to round out the CEA, and Rob Kuttner says in general this is a good group, which is probably because Bob Kuttner has himself been a member of the Progressive Give Up Formula group, in earlier stages, of his evolution, when he was the editor, of the Prospect. That was the position of the Prospect. They were always kind of a part of the mainstream, kind of manning the leftish ramparts, of the mainstream. I think they've gone further to the left now, under Dave Dayen, because there's much more of an admixture, of MMT economics at the Prospect now, these days. But that was not the case, under Kuttner. He could have chosen Tim Geithner ally Lael Brainerd, I should say, for Treasury Secretary, and instead went with Janet Yellen, an economist who has made tight labor markets her life's work. That's why some of us think that maybe Janet Yellen is really progressive, because she wants labor markets to be tight and wages to go up and inequality to go down. And no doubt she is sincere about this. The issue is she tough enough about it to stand her ground and to take actions that were necessary? When she was with the Fed, she raised interest rates much before it was necessary. Anyway, going further. More concerning is the presence of the new vampire squid BlackRock in key policy-making roles. Brian Deese, a managing director at BlackRock with several roles in the Obama White House, is on track to be named director of the National Economic Council, and Adewale Adeyemo, who served as a BlackRock advisor, and CEO Larry Finks, interim chief of staff, in between Obama economic team jobs, and president of the Obama Foundation, will become deputy Treasury Secretary. You might have noticed Obama in that preceding sentence a lot. Concerns have definitely emerged that Obama veterans are muscling out alternatives for top administration posts, returning a team to the pinnacles of policymaking with a questionable record of results, both economically and politically. Yes, very questionable. They prepared the way for Trump, as we all know. This would be pretty expected. Biden practically ran under the name Obama Biden during the primaries. He clearly values experience, and the last team in the White House has that. That this is an Obama restoration neglects the full picture and some shifts in the party since the Obama years. The education secretary is not going to be a reformer in the Arne Duncan mold. Thank God, that was a neoliberal nightmare. The Biden team appears to be more energized by the international dimension. Oh, sorry, I missed this. The post-Obama era saw wildcat teacher strikes and disfavor for the ed reform agenda within the party. That, I'm sure, also reflects the opinion of Jill Biden. I don't think she particularly cared for the neoliberal take on education that was represented by Arne Duncan. The Biden team, which is probably not surprising for a community college professor, right? The Biden team appears to be more energized by the international dimensions of the climate crisis, placing a former Secretary of State as envoy at the National Security Council, and on corporate power as reflected above. There are a couple of promising signs. The biggest involves not swallowing whatever big law designee Silicon Valley tried to install in the key agencies. It's unclear who will get to run the antitrust division of the Justice Department, but Karen Dunn won't. This is already an improvement over the Obama years, where Google famously held a meeting every week on average with administration personnel throughout the 2 terms, and hundreds of officials moved back and forth between the company and the government. That was amazing, right? To what do we owe this change? First of all, concentrated corporate power has become a greater concern within upper echelon Democratic circles. The late Obama administration published several reports on the subject, but New Brandeisians had influence in crafting the past 2 Democratic platforms. Even the aforementioned Bruce Reed, who was the top Biden tech policy aide on the campaign, has been forcefully opposed to big tech. I guess there's something good about that guy. Denouncing liability protections for platform companies for user-generated content and helping assemble the online privacy measure in California. And there's evidently a consensus on Capitol Hill for action on antitrust as well. Even the relatively moderate Senator Amy Klobuchar, ranking Democrat on the Senate Antitrust Committee, is openly talking about breaking up Google. The winds have shifted. Who knew? Who knew? Anyway, even the usual suspects for a Biden antitrust staff aren't saying the usual things. Bill Baer, who's part of the agency review team for the FTC, was antitrust division chief under Obama. And he's giving speeches about the need for stronger enforcement, citing growing concentration in agriculture, telecom, wireless, travel, pharma, and beer. Well, if people in the review team really believe that, then I'd raise the question, why have we been hearing that Heidi Heitkamp might be the choice for agriculture secretary, of the Biden administration? I mean, that would suggest that what they really need as Secretary of Agriculture is someone who would break up big concentrations in ag. And who is that going to be? Well, it might be Marcia Fudge, of course. It might be Marcia Fudge, but it would definitely not be Heidi Heitkamp, who just loves the big corporates. Anyway, a Biden administration will need to make critical decisions on antitrust policy early on. Getting someone to fill an expected vacancy at the FTC is critical to whether the agency will file suit against Facebook for undermining competition by buying out its rivals. Amazon's incredible pandemic hiring spree and branching out into new industries like pharmacies will merit a response as it centralizes unparalleled power. And there's the Google case left to prosecute and potentially combine with a second case from state attorneys general. This goes beyond the big four tech platforms. Similarly dominant Salesforce is about to announce a $17 billion purchase of Slack. I'm afraid Dave missed this one. The sale was announced today as a $27.7 billion purchase of Slack by Salesforce. PNC Bank is buying the U.S. Army's Spanish bank, BBVA. Penguin Random House has a proposed purchase of Simon & Schuster, which would take us from 5 major book publishers to 4, an obvious response to Amazon's dominance as a leading bookseller. This concentration creep, when mergers in one side of a transaction lead to another, has been growing across numerous industries. Biden's antitrust team will have to decide whether to wave all of this through or stop it cold. And Dave says, I don't expect Biden to nationalize Amazon or ban the type of surveillance-based advertising that has made Facebook and Google rich, and also necessitated concentration creep among some of the digital media sites like BuzzFeed and HuffPost just to survive. But I do expect Biden to carry on the momentum that anti-monopoly activists have garnered. Just looked at what's happened since the Google case was announced. The company rolled back its AMP format which was seen as an enticement to get the publishers to play by Google's rules. Apple, wary of the same treatment as Google, cut its App Store fees in half, and the iPhone maker is developing an alternative to Google Search as scrutiny heightens on its lucrative multi-billion-dollar deal with Google at issue in the antitrust case. The lesson here is that Biden's centrist proclivities are more hemmed in where the policy center of the Democratic Party has changed. There may be tons of Silicon Valley money flooding Democrat campaigns, but that's been blunted by a years-long successful effort to win the policy argument in Washington. It's a useful model for advocates in other issue areas. Change what the party believes, and who the party will choose to carry out those beliefs will follow. That, I think, was a truly excellent piece by Dave, with some things that are not being covered in any other part of the press. That was different. Now, next, have a post by Worka Bragman from Jacobin. And this is about one of the left's favorite people. Joe Biden's Neera Tanden pick is even worse than you thought, by Worka Bragman. Yeah, no, Mickey Kantz was waxing, I shouldn't say enthusiastic, but very energetic about this today. President-elect Joe Biden will reportedly nominate a White House budget director who's been one of the country's most prominent critics of U.S. Senator Bernie Sanders in his previously backed Social Security cuts. Biden, who repeatedly pushed for such cuts throughout his career, announced his selection of Center for American Progress President Neera Tanden as his choice to run the powerful White House Office of Management and Budget. Now, that was a position that previously was occupied by such people as Peter Orszag and Jack Lew. It's a very critical position. It's the budget position inside of the administration. Opposite number of the CBO has to contend with CBO, has been similarly conservative and deficit hawkish over many years now. Okay. Of course, Tanden has been a longtime aide to Hillary Clinton, and she touted her think tank's proposal to reduce Social Security benefits in 2010 proposal to reduce Social Security benefits in 2012, as Biden was pushing for such cuts in the Obama administration. So he was pushing for those cuts. Her think tank was aligned with that push, and she worked with Biden on that push for Social Security cuts. How is that to happen? Through the plan called the Chain CPI that would have slowed the rate at which Social Security benefits increase over time by roughly 2%. So over 5 years, it would have reduced Social Security by a compounded rate of 2% a year, probably would have compounded to something like 12 or 13% reduction in Social Security benefits over 5 years had it passed. I thank God that it didn't, because my Social Security is little enough as it is. If it had been 13% or less all through this time, I don't know what would have happened. If it had been in place since 2012, it would have been 8 years in, and it would have been more like 22% down, okay, from what it is now. And a number of you are also on Social Security here. Neera Tanden is the enemy, was the enemy of older people at that time. Not just Bernie Sanders' enemy, the enemy of seniors. Sanders led the fight in the Senate against the Chain CPI, while outside groups were divided over whether to line up behind the president. Some, like the Progressive Change Campaign Committee, the PCCC, which now is Warren Wing, vocally opposed the cuts The Center on Budget Policy Priorities, that's the think tank we talked about before, where Fred Greenstein was and Heather Boushey was. And, well, I'm not sure Heather Boushey was there, but Jared Bernstein, okay, is there now. Fred Greenstein, I think, is still the head of the CBPP. Anyway, found that chain CPI would cut Social Security retirement benefits by about 2% on average. So CBPP opposed the chained CPI, and they wanted instead the CPI for the elderly, which took a true account of the increases in medical costs that older people face. If the CPIE had been passed in 2012, that would have led to considerable gains in Social Security benefits over that same period of time, probably more like a 13% gain over 5 years, and by now a 22% gain. Big difference between the two positions, enormous difference. Tandon's CAP, at the time considered to be the largest liberal think tank in Washington, also supported the idea and was a significant voice in favor of the administration's plan. CBPP did not support, the idea. But Tandon's CAP supported the idea, not just Tandon. She explained her views in a disingenuous explanation, framing it as a choice between laying the burden for Social Security benefits, an unfair tax burden on the middle class, when that has never been the proposed trade-off from the leftists on that. What leftists have wanted to do is to raise the cap on Social Security, so that people who are not middle class but upper class in terms of their income are taxed on their full income for supporting Social Security. In other words, what's been advocated for by the left has been the kind of riddance of the payroll tax cap that is advocated for by Bernie Sanders. This is a quote from Neera Tanden, but we've put those ideas on the table. We think that those legitimate ideas that need to be part of a proposal where everyone's at the table, we don't just ask the middle class Americans to sacrifice. We ask all Americans to sacrifice. That was highly disingenuous, because the proponents of getting rid of the tax cap were not asking middle-class Americans to sacrifice. They were primarily asking upper-class Americans to sacrifice, the ones who could really afford it. So, so Walker goes through here the chained CPI and the problem with the chained CPI. In 2016, Tanden wrote on Twitter that chained CPI would help Social Security solvency, but she said she disagreed with the policy. So later on, she backed off, that policy. Of course, as you know from listening to me for a very long time, there is no problem of Social Security solvency, none at all, because the issue of solvency doesn't relate to a particular program. It relates to the federal government as a whole. And with a monetary sovereign government, such as the United States, there is never a question of sovereignty. all that is necessary to support Social Security is to appropriate the benefits going forward every single year. There is nothing in the Social Security Trust Fund. It's just a record, okay, of debts of the Treasury to the Social Security program. It's a paper record. There's no money in it. There's no fund. There's no fund in the trust fund. It's an accounting record. Where the money comes from for Social Security each year is from the continuing appropriations of Congress, ordering the executive to pay Social Security benefits. Then Treasury pays for Social Security benefits out of the Treasury spending account, the Treasury general account. Okay, it's called. Now, that Treasury general account is topped up by the Fed. It is the power of the Fed to top up the Treasury general account in response to appropriations that actually produces, or I should say that allows the Treasury to make the Social Security payments as they fall due. This has nothing to do with something that's in a trust fund sitting in some bank. The whole thing is a false analogy. Anyway, enough of that. That's the critical gist, okay, of that particular article. So, the next one. Let me go through this one real quickly, if I can. So, this one appeared on by November 30th also, and it's by Jake Johnson, Common Dreams, citing past calls for Social Security cuts. The progressives are not pleased with Biden pick of Nara Tanden, okay, for OMB. No, we are not pleased. We are angry. We are enraged. We think that Biden's calls for unity are absolutely bogus, absolutely faux, just bullshit. He's not looking for unity. He's looking for surrender. Fuck him. Okay. Anyway, a task has taken on even greater significance amid the coronavirus pandemic and an unprecedented economic calamity that calls for sweeping stimulus measures. That is, Tanden would be charged with crafting the administration's spending agenda. As far as I'm concerned, the worst possible person to craft that, or one of the worst possible people to craft that. I mean, since when has she been good at crafting a spending agenda? Since when has she been good at keeping track? Since when has she been good at dealing with the CBO? Anyway, pressure from the progressive side was focused on austerity proponent Bruce Reed, because it was rumored he was going to be appointed as the head, okay, of OMB, the old friend of Joe Biden. Well, guess where Neera Tanden got her start? She got her start during the Clinton administration, working for Bruce Reed. Anyway, the article points out, while news that Reed is out of the running for OMB president was welcomed by progressives, the selection of Tanden, who worked under Reed in the Clinton White House, also sparked concerns given her past comments on healthcare policy and Social Security. Yes, of course, she's been totally opposed to Medicare for all for a long time. Walker Bragman in his post said, "We should have savings on entitlements, and the Center for American Progress has put forward ideas on proposals to reform the beneficiary structure of Social Security. Some of our progressive allies aren't excited about this, okay, as we." Oh, I've already quoted a part of that, so I'll skip that now. Yeah, that was the same thing we saw, okay, in the Bruce Reed article. So, though she's frequently described in the media as a progressive, leaked internal emails reveal Tandon's own political instincts, okay, to depart from what is typically considered to be progressive. Nathan Robinson noted, okay, in an article he wrote in 2018, okay, in Current Affairs, and that's a pretty damn good article, okay, on Neera Tanden, which we won't have time to go through now, but you can catch the link from the article that I've linked to by Jake Johnson, and that is a very interesting article and gets to the heart, okay, of Neera Tanden, okay, as well. Okay, and Ryan Grimm says, when it comes to OMB, the best thing you can say, that, okay, is Ryan Grimm, okay, The Intercept. When it comes to OMB, the best thing that you can say is that Neera Tanden is not at all a deficit hawk, and that matters in that particular position. And then he points out, and right about this, the Center for American Progress took a risk to buck the White House in 2013 and come out against their deficit hysteria. That, of course, was a year after the remarks on Social Security that came from Tanden. So that was a risk, and that was good. And there was an article by Ryan Grimm that was written on June 6, 2013, cataloging that. It was an article written in the Huffington Post, I think, at that time, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah, HuffPost. Grand Bargain loses Center for American Progress support in major blow to austerity. And so you can click on that and read that article dealing with some of the history of this. News that Biden intends to nominate Tanden for OMB came as the president-elect began to assemble a team of economic advisors which will inherit a crisis. And the former vice president has picked Cecilia Rouse, a Princeton University labor economist. I think she's more an education economist than she is a labor economist, but okay. To be chairwoman of the Council of Economic Advisors, the Wall Street Journal reported. Guess I disagree with the Wall Street Journal. Guess who's right? The president-elect has selected Wally Adeyemo, former senior international economic advisor during the Obama administration, to serve as Ms. Yellen's top deputy at the Treasury Department. He will turn to two campaign economic advisors, Jared Bernstein and Heather Boushey, to serve as members of the CEA alongside Cecilia Rouse. Now, just to say something here, MMT economists will have some access to the Council, okay, of Economic Advisors through Jared Bernstein. I don't know whether they talk to Heather Boushey much, but I know Stephanie Kelton has been talking with Jared Bernstein for years. I don't know if they have come to a meeting of the minds, but I have reason to believe, based on the testimony that Jared gave on a panel, okay, with Olivier Blanchard and Randy Ray and Jacob Kierkegaard in front of, okay, I'm pretty sure it was a House committee, but I'm not sure. The testimony, okay, that Jared gave did reflect in some measure some of the perspectives, okay, of MMT that he had internalized and that were fully in bloom, of course, in Randy Wray's testimony, and echoed also in part by Blanchard. Okay, so that was very interesting testimony, and it had reflected that Jared had learned something over the years. I also have some blog posts, okay, on my site, which deal with some questions that Jared had way back in, I think it was in 2018, okay, if I recall correctly, at the Economists for Peace and Security meetings. And okay, so Jared asked some questions, posed them, okay, in a very interesting way, and got back aggressive pushback from Randy and Stephanie, okay, in combination, and also some quite aggressive pushback. But for me, I have no idea whether Jared, okay, ever read my stuff on it. But it's there on my site, and you can read it if you want to. Justin Wolfers, a professor, okay, at the University of Michigan, praised Biden's emerging team of economic advisors, which the former vice president is expected to formally announce this week as, quote, damn solid, unquote. In my view, Justin is just a typical Keynesian economist who is sometimes prone to deficit hawk types of arguments. So if he says that this team, okay, is damn solid, I worry about this, okay, a little. Quote, this is a group that is individually and collectively committed to both full employment and boosting wages, okay, said Wolfers. I'm glad to know that Wolfers is committed to that. Labor Secretary Robert Reich offered a similar assessment, tweeting, quote, excellent, all committed to full employment, boosting wages, reducing inequality. So maybe Wolfers is stronger when it comes to reducing inequality than he was back in 2010, by 2011, when he was giving a particularly sad performance in this respect. Okay, I'm running out of space here and I'm running out of time. So, okay, I do want to cover, I've linked to an article by, in Substack here by Glenn Greenwald, which is an excellent article, okay, an excellent article on Neera Tanden, which goes on the attack from the side of her support for the Russian tampering hoax, a story that the Democrats actually rode for years. It was the heart of their so-called resistance to Donald Trump. And there are lots of interesting quotes here, okay, and links. Tanden stands zero chance of being confirmed, okay, by the Senate, said John Cornyn, okay, of Texas. I hope that's right. I don't want to see her as the only choice, okay, at all. And David Sirota hypothesized that, quote, it's not a coincidence they're putting Neera Tanden, the single biggest and most aggressive Bernie Sanders critic in the United States, in the United States of America, specifically at OMB, while Sanders is the Senate Budget Committee ranking chair, unquote. Sirota's statement suggests Biden's nomination of Tanden was intended as yet more humiliation doled out to the Democratic loyal Sanders left by cucking the Vermont senator even further, by forcing him to shepherd the confirmation of one of his most vicious and amoral attackers, who Sanders himself in 2019 vehemently denounced. But Sirot's point also raises the prospect that Tanden's nomination could even encounter trouble from that side of the aisle as well, given Sanders' compliant and disciplined conduct over the last 6 months. More likely we'll see him roll out a literal red carpet for Tanden to walk on, gently toss red roses on it before she passes, and then serve her a glass of Chardonnay rather than meaningfully obstruct her confirmation. The list of sociopathic and even monstrous acts from Tanden is too long to list comprehensively. But anyway, Glenn goes through them all here in great detail. And he does it well. Okay, it's a great article. Okay, I won't have time to go through the whole thing here. She once punched, however, Faiz Shakir, who later became Bernie's campaign manager, you recall. She later punched him because she didn't like a question he asked of Hillary Clinton when Hillary came to the CAP and gave a talk. And Shakir asked a perfectly polite question, and what he got for his trouble was a dodge from Hillary Clinton and a punch in the chest from the overexcited Neera Tanden. But given how tiny she is, I'm sure he was not damaged too seriously by the punch in the chest, but who knows? It was very inappropriate anyway. Anyway, there are lots of stories attached to Tanden. Okay, Glenn says one can reasonably view Biden's choice of Tanden as a positive. She's no different in character or ideology than any of the faceless, more obscure DNC operatives who would occupy this position if she did not. But because of how well known her sociopathy, her militarism, and corporatism are to many on the liberal left, her face serves as an undeniable and unavoidable reminder of what the Biden administration and Democratic Party really are. She illuminates the truth about their real aims. But beyond things like wanting to steal the oil of Libya after bombing it into oblivion, outing sexual harassment complainants, and physically assaulting and censoring her own employees, there is one uniquely abominable feature of Neera Tanden. She is one of the most deranged conspiracy theorists in the United States and has done more than almost any other Washington functionary to contaminate by Democrats' mental health, capacity to reason, and faith in the legitimacy of U.S. Elections. And then Glenn at length goes through her ties, Tanden's ties to Hillary Clinton, her enthusiasm for the Defense of Marriage Act, the fact that she took Clinton's 2016 loss to Trump very, very hard, handled it extremely poorly. She joined numerous Democrats in encouraging electors of the Electoral College to ignore their state's votes and refuse to elect Trump as president. There were many rationales invoked for this. Tanden's was a CAP article promoting hashtag resistance fanatic Richard Painter's argument that Trump's violations of the Emolument Clause precluded an Electoral College win. She insisted that Hillary lost because of Russia, claiming the Russians did enough damage to affect more than 70K votes in 3 states. Now, I don't think the violations of the Emoluments Clause precluded an Electoral College win. I think he had to be given the win. Then he could have been impeached. But you have to go through a process which is correct here. She insisted that Hillary lost because of Russia, claiming the Russians did enough damage to affect more than 70K votes in 3 states. And so she was pushing the Steele dossier, the whole Russian conspiracy thing. She continued to push it 4 years after the 2016 election. She began strongly implying, if not outright stating, that Russian hackers changed the vote totals and that this is why Trump is surprised, as everyone else. We all know this is all a fantasy. It's been debunked numerous times. I mean, she's just been really reprehensible, in this respect and in the various other respects. A bigger insult to progressives in the United States could not have been conceived by the Biden team. I think there's only one way to appropriately hit back about this, and that is to build an alternative as much as we can outside of the party. Now, I'm not suggesting we cease to support people in the party who want to turn the party back to being a working people's party. That's fine. I don't have a problem with that. People can do more than one thing, at once, I think. Now, there was one other article I wanted to hit from the week. By Ryan Cooper on December 1st. Let me go through this and just pick out what he has to say. It's different. He says already the conflict, the conflict between the left and moderate wings, Democratic coalition, which is slowed down for obvious reasons, has broken out again. Lefties and centrists are sniping at each other with several picks on the left over the appalling policy records and Wall Street connections of various selections. On the moderate side, over the left being not being team players, the usual thing. Of course, what they mean by team players is that we give in to them, never that they give in to us. So they're the ones who are not the team players. They want to have the team without being team players. They're not going to get that. So far, there is little sign this administration will satisfy a more elemental requirement, namely the kind of ferocious determination and energetic vision that is a necessary precondition to repairing this shattered country. And that's the main point of this. It's the vision that is needed. Without vision, the people perish. And we are perishing. To even have a prayer of passing anything to the Senate, Democrats will need to sweep both of the runoff elections in Georgia in January. If they don't, then the Biden administration will have to lean on every legal authority in the U.S. Code to be able to do anything. And even then, face the possibility that those actions will still be struck down by partisan hacks on the Supreme Court. Is Team Biden up to this challenge? Janet Yellen is reasonably progressive, but as Fed chair during the Obama administration, she voted for a number of interest rate hikes. that many people pointed out were obviously premature, conservatively guarding against inflation instead of aggressively pursuing full employment and higher wages. What's more, there are disturbing numbers of Wall Street insiders being handed deputy spots at Treasury. I wasn't aware of numbers of Wall Street. I was aware of Wally Adeyemo being handed such a spot. Were there others in the Kuttner article at Treasury? He links to Kuttner's article at Treasury, but I don't see a mention. I don't see a mention of anyone else except for Wally Adeyemo, at Treasury. The other mention, of course, is Brian Deese at the National Economic Council, the NEC. Okay. A rare, straightforward, bright spot is Jared Bernstein, a smart and gregarious lefty economist selected for the Council of Economic Advisors, who has been on the right side of nearly all the important economic questions for the last 10 years, says Ryan. So that kind of places Ryan. He's probably a little too enthusiastic over Jared, but anyway, he likes Jared. Okay, I kind of like Jared too, though I continue to harbor the suspicion that he might fold in certain situations because he loves that seat at the table. Okay, final paragraph of this post, which is short. Meanwhile, as Jonathan Geyer writes at the American Prospect, most of Biden's foreign policy team got rich openly peddling its connections to government over the last 4 years. Since the Trump administration was not much in favor of handling contracting gifts to firms full of Democrats, it's likely a safe bet much of the money came from interested parties looking to essentially bribe future administration insiders. More broadly, people who have profited handsomely from status quo forces sending this country to the devil, endless pointless imperialism, corruption that was legalized, extreme policy timidity unless Wall Street is threatened, are not likely to countenance the sweeping action necessary to fix that status quo. Okay, then he goes into Neera Tanden's appointments and points out all the difficulties, with Neera Tanden. And he says that she is a mystifying choice, to put in arguably the most important administrative position in the administration. And she says, at any rate, this suggests the coalescing administration that is not exactly champing at the bit to clean up this smoking ruin of a country. It seems like a collection of mostly bog standard, moderate liberals, some fairly earnest, some plainly just looking to pad out their resumes for a few years before they go back to their buck-raking private sector careers, and some in between, people who on average will not want to rock the boat too much, but much less a kind of extreme norm-bending action that might upset future offers of consulting contracts. Now, nobody would be happier than myself if Yellen turns out to be the second coming of FDR advisor Rexford Tugwell, whose name was Rexford Guy Tugwell. I never eliminate the guy because it's so wonderful to have a name, Rexford Guy Tugwell, right? Or if Tanden turns OMB into a well-oiled machine. At least Biden has not hired any actual Republicans as Obama did. So far, his team, thankfully, does not appear to be too worried about the national debt. But it is hard indeed to imagine this administration rising to the challenge of a country in worse shape than at any year since 1932. once had the honor of meeting Rexford Guy Tugwell back in 1972. Tell you the story of that someday. But he was quite a guy. At the time, he was writing a new constitution for the United States. This was, of course, what was it? 32 years after the New Deal was over, after all. It was still, okay, the Roosevelt administration, but we were moving into World War II at that time. So that, okay, is Ryan Cooper's piece. That's a great take, I think, on the cabinet picks so far and why we want to be skeptical about them and angry about them to some degree, and why we really need to build that external alternative to the Democratic Party. They need to worry about their left at all times, and they are not in that spot now. Okay. So, okay, there's some new news on the horizon that I want to cover tonight. And I also want to do one more thing when it comes to the administration. This appears in the Fiscal Times, which is the rag started with money from the Peter G. Peterson Foundation. This is where the debt hawks live. And this is an article from one of the debt hawks debating the debt. Biden's team reflects a big shift. This is by Yuval Rosenberg, who's very high up at the Fiscal Times. Has a column here every day, article every day. He's quite good at what he does, given his orientation, his particular orientation. Of course, he's distressed by the Trump administration when the public debt surged, as he put it, from $14.4 trillion on the day Trump was sworn in to more than $21.2 trillion now. He's quite upset about that, of course. But what's interesting is that while he notes from the Washington Post, David Lynch's article there, that Senator Graham suddenly wants to finally begin to address the debt, which he never wanted to address while the Trump administration was there. John Thune both want to get back to cutting spending, and now it's time for entitlement reform. Growth in the economy are all things we're going to have to be focused on. Then there's pushback, from the progressive side, pointing out that Joe Biden, while in the past he's urged a fiscal restraint, signaled this week his choice of top advisors that his top economic priority will be to spend as needed to address the pandemic and revive the labor market and the economy. So the way the Fiscal Times interprets the choices is that there's going to be big spending. And he quotes from Yellen, who has warned in the past that the debt is unsustainable, but has been a vocal proponent of additional coronavirus relief spending. Quote, it's an American tragedy, and it's essential we move with urgency, she said on Tuesday. Quote, inaction will produce a self-reinforcing downturn, causing yet more devastation. Paul Krugman has said Biden's picks are, as a group, a bevy of deficit doves. I would say that's what they are. They are doves on the deficit. They're doves now when we have to get back to full uh, employment. And according to Mike the Consul of the Roosevelt Institute, they'll also have strong antibodies against cynical debt hysteria and conservative boilerplates. Okay, and they will. But my central point is this: yes, they are deficit doves. It's a team of doves, evidently, but they still have a few hawks that have gotten appointed. And right now, there aren't any deficit owls in the administration. There are deficit hawks and deficit doves. But there were doves and hawks in the Obama administration, too. More hawks, okay, than doves. That balance has now shifted. But in neither administration were there any owls. What is a deficit owl? A deficit owl is someone of the MMT persuasion. There's not one such person in the administration thus far. And the article catalogs what it claims a shift in economic thought. The Biden team's push for government borrowing to fill the pandemic-sized hole in the economy also reflects a broader shift in some leading economists' view of public debt. Lynch writes at the Post, by cutting interest rates to near zero and all but exhausting its conventional toolkit, the Federal Reserve has made such borrowing more attractive, left the nation's fiscal authorities and Congress with a greater role in propping up the economy, they say. Economists have by and large warned a failure by the federal government to provide additional relief could result in a slower and more painful recovery. And they say, we're going to get a recovery starting in April, May, whether or not we get this package. Economist Adam Paposan, head of the Peterson Institute for International Economics, which is not the same as the Peterson Foundation, by the way, totally different organizations. Peterson Foundation was mostly funded by Peterson with the majority of $1 billion. Sometimes it's claimed, to be $1 billion, where even though he was at the head of the Peterson Institute, for many years and raised considerable money for the Institute, he never put in, $1 billion of his own money into that institute. So that's just to be clear. Now, quote, whether we get stimulus in December or January is about how much human suffering there is between now and then, unquote. And in that context, we will soon move to the next article very quickly. But we have to note Democratic economists Jason Furman, who chaired the Council of Economic Advisors under Obama, and Larry Summers, who was Treasury Secretary under Clinton and head of the National Economic Council in the Obama administration, argue in a new paper released Tuesday, right now, that persistently low interest rates call for a revolution in thinking about the dangers of debt and deficits. People moving somewhat towards the MMT position, but saying, of course, that having debt forever is unsustainable, which, of course, is not true for a monetary sovereign. Having debt forever is quite sustainable if you spend on the right things. It's about what you spend on. It's about actually the legitimacy of your government. It's not about whether you issue money without having to issue a corresponding amount of debt. And not everyone is convinced that fiscal policy can ignore the long-term dynamics of debt, says the article. In response to the post-peace Tuesday, the Committee for a Responsible Budget, I think it's a responsible federal budget, the CRFB, which is the Maya McGuinness Group, another group supported by Peterson Foundation money for years. They tweeted, quote, "We must borrow now to address the current crisis, but we will need to address the long-term national debt in a reasonable way after the economy recovers." So the CRFB retains the long-term austerity notion that at some point we're going to have to cope with the horrific debt that our grandchildren will otherwise have to face. But this is the climate in Washington now. So since it's the climate, it can be expected that the Biden administration will spend big at first to get out of the economic problems we're in now, to get the economy actually roaring back, because they recognize, I know from other things that have been said over weeks and months now, that they think the Obama administration went too small and made a big mistake, okay, after the crash of 2008. And I think they believe that's what led, okay, to the defeat of the Democrats in 2010. I don't think that's all there was to it, but that was a lot of it. There should have been a $2 trillion stimulus bill then, instead of the $800 billion stimulus bill, okay, that appeared. That was a big mistake. I think they know that's a big mistake. I don't think they're about to repeat that particular mistake. They will pass as big a bill as they can get through if they get control of the Senate. If they don't get control of the Senate, they'll probably work with the Fed to get trillions of dollars pumped into the economy anyway, in ways we've talked about in some of the previous live streams here. But the point being, they will go big to get big money into the economy in order to get it rolling, in order to get ready for the election of 2022. That is going to happen. Okay, but now to relief, because relief noises, okay, have been coming, okay, around. First, an article that also appeared in the Fiscal Times really right before the show. I caught this before the show, and so I quickly inserted it. Centrist senators float $908 billion stimulus deal. Okay, talks between Democratic and Republican leaders have gone nowhere for months, with House Speaker Nancy Pelosi calling for a relief bill worth upwards of $2.2 trillion, while Republican lawmakers have shown little interest in any package exceeding $500 billion. Now, we have to be accurate about this. Republican lawmakers in the Senate have shown very little interest in a package exceeding $500 billion. But the people in the White House and the Treasury have favored, as far as we know, up to a $1.8 trillion bill, and perhaps even more than that, even gone as far as $2 trillion in the run-up to the election. After the election, Trump's interest faded in, doing anything, because he's been focused on his defeat, okay, in the election. But the point being, until that time, there was interest, okay, on their part, but they never put necessary pressure on the Senate to get the Senate to show interest. And the Senate was focused on the confirmation, okay, of Amy Coney Barrett. Anyway, some of the centrists finally got something going, the so-called centrists, led by Senator Susan Collins, okay, Republican of Maine, Joe Manchin, okay, Democrat, okay, of West Virginia, both of whom, okay, were reelected, tried to kickstart talks, okay, negotiations, because the hospitalizations are soaring. Economists are growing increasingly concerned about another severe slowdown this winter. Manchin said at a press conference, it's inexcusable for us to leave town and not have an agreement. Bernie Sanders has been saying that, of course. Our action is to provide emergency relief is needed now more than ever before. The people need to know we're not going to leave until we get something accomplished. And Tim Kaine went on, on YouTube today and had an interview with I forget who. Okay, and he said that he was going to vote against any recess of the Senate, okay, or adjournment of the Senate for Christmas. He wasn't going to leave until a relief bill was passed. Anyway, other supporters of the new proposal include Republican Senators Lisa Murkowski and Mitt Romney and Bill Cassidy. That's 4 Republican senators. The Republicans now have a majority in the Senate of 3. So 4 Republican senators, if they stick to their guns, are sufficient to break the majority if all the Democrats vote with them. Now, the Democrats who are most likely not to vote with them, okay, in the Senate include Joe Manchin is one, Senator Mark Warner, okay, is another who might have some troubles with a big spending bill. Those are the 2 most likely to defect, and the most likely person is Joe Manchin, okay, to defect, okay, from a Democratic consensus that there has to be a stimulus bill of some sort. So the fact that Manchin was kind of chairing this group, okay, is very significant, that he's on board for what he considers to be a significant on the stimulus bill. Okay, but anyway, so there's Warner, Jeanne Shaheen of New Hampshire, an independent, Angus King of Maine, who caucuses with the Democrats. He's one of the 47. Okay, so if they agree, all the other senators, okay, are going to go along with it. Okay, except on one issue. Okay, on one issue. And that issue, it may prove to be the sticking point for that. It's liability. It's the business of excusing corporations from liability in connection with illnesses contracted in the workplace that come from COVID. Okay. Anyway, in this group are some members of the problem-solving caucus in the House, which released a $1.5 trillion stimulus plan in September, have also been involved, including Representatives Josh Gottheimer of New Jersey, who's a Democrat, and Tom Reed, who's a Republican, okay, of New York. And what's in the plan? Okay, it's an interim package, not intended to be a final package, designed to provide financial support until President Joe Biden takes office in January. Biden echoed that idea, saying, quote, any package passed in lame duck session is at best just a start. So you have a statement from Biden saying it's just a start. Although the final details have not yet been agreed upon, a draft of the plan shows it would provide $288 billion for small businesses, $160 billion for state and local governments, and $180 billion for unemployment aid, including a $300 per week supplemental benefit through March. Now that's fine, but that's supposed to be a supplemental benefit. But most people's unemployment that occurred as a result of the coronavirus their state unemployment will have expired. So the so-called supplemental benefit, even if it passes, would be the only benefit that they would get. And that, of course, is much too little for people to live on. $300 a week, $1,200 a month. It's really too little for people to live on, less their jobs. In other words, it's still offering people a hardship type of solution. I mean, it's better than nothing, but it's still a hardship. It would also include short-term liability protections from coronavirus lawsuits to protect businesses while states draw up their own rules. It would not, however, provide another round of $1,200 checks for individuals. And here's a chart showing what the spending is for. State, local, and tribal governments, $160 billion. Additional unemployment insurance, $180 billion. $288 billion for small businesses, including PPP program extensions, EIDL, restaurants, stages, and deductibility. Not sure what that means. CDFI, MDI, community lender support, $12 billion. Transportation, this is for airlines, airports, buses, transit, and Amtrak, $45 billion. Vaccine development, and distribution, testing and tracing, $16 billion. Healthcare provider relief fund, $35 billion. Education, $82 billion. Student loans, $4 billion. Housing assistance, $25 billion. That's rental assistance. Nutrition, agriculture, $26 billion. U.S. Postal Service, $10 billion. Childcare, $10 billion. Broadband, $10 billion. And $5 billion for opioid treatment. Provide short-term federal protection from coronavirus-related lawsuits with the purpose of giving states time, to develop their own response. So in other words, some states are going to ram through a response probably very quickly, probably northern states where there's a traditional concern for trying to protect people from problems. But in very red states, most probably they'll act slowly, if at all, and people will not be protected from irresponsible businesses making the workplace dangerous. That's what's going to happen. That could be a sticking point for this. There's some Democratic senators, maybe Bernie Sanders, maybe Jeff Merkley, who, as pressured as they are by need to get help with people, may dig in their heels and may say, we cannot hold corporations harmless. We cannot give in to Mitch McConnell on this. This is not going to happen. We cannot give a green light to corporations to make their workplaces just heedless of the possibility of their employees catching the coronavirus, while the managers, who never have to go into the workplace at all, get to stay home and rake in the profits. We cannot do that. We cannot free up Amazon to do what it likes in its workplaces without fear of any lawsuits. We cannot do that. Where the money would come from. Romney said, and Romney was very emphasized this much, look, it's only going to involve $348 billion in new money, with the rest coming from unspent funds provided by the CARES Act, in March. It says, now I happen to be a deficit hawk. I don't like borrowing money. I don't like spending money we don't have. But the time to borrow money, maybe the only time to borrow money, is when there's a crisis. Well, when Romney was doing his private equity deals, the deals he did with companies to buy up and acquire companies, What he used to do, and his group used to do, what they excelled as doing, was borrowing money from banks, not in order to cope with the crisis, but to acquire companies that were having problems. And then they would borrow the money to loot those companies, to make them empty shells and acquire big bonuses for themselves. I mean, that was the game Romney was playing. That's how he got as rich as he is today, in part. He loved borrowing money when he was in the private sector. He wasn't a deficit hawk then. Sorry, folks, I couldn't resist that. Maybe the only time to borrow money is when there's a crisis, unquote. Referring to an earlier coronavirus proposal supported by Treasury Secretary Stephen Mnuchin, he added, "This is not a 1.8 trillion stimulus deal. This is a relief measure, half of that amount." So there are still some people in Washington who are giving excuses for not coming up with a $2.2 trillion CARES Act or a $1.8 trillion stimulus bill. And the excuse is, we can't afford it because we shouldn't be borrowing money. We can't afford it because the federal government can run out of money. Implied, because the federal government can have solvency problems, because the debt can get too large. Still the same nonsense, right here, right now, being used as an excuse to keep this at $908 billion. And only $348 billion in new money. Imagine that. Steep hill to climb. The plan faces critics on all sides. The Washington Post, Jeff Stein reports, congressional aides have expressed doubt that it will go anywhere. There is some hope, however, that parts of the proposal could be incorporated into the government funding bill that must pass by December 11th, and which could provide the only realistic chance of providing COVID relief funds before Biden takes office. Alternatively, the proposal could provide a starting point for negotiations in the next Congress. In any event, the bill faces the basic problem of coming from a small group of centrists who have been far from the center of power in recent years. As Politico's Jake Sherman and Anna Palmer put it Tuesday, Congress is run by the leadership, and most every deal comes from the leadership. At best, this is a guideline for what a chunk of the Senate is willing to accept, but view this as a Senate's version of the problem-solving caucus, and that went nowhere. Yeah, but this Congress coming up is more finely balanced. I'm talking about now the next Congress. Even if the Republicans win both seats in Georgia, it's still 52 to 48, not 53 to 47. Okay. That means 3 votes swing the majority. This caucus will have 4 votes at all times if they stay together. That means that this caucus could run the next Senate, even if Mitch McConnell is still elected as the majority leader. And by the way, there are enough votes, enough Republican votes in this caucus so that those senators could retire McConnell as the majority leader if they want to do so. If that's what they want to do, they can block him from becoming the majority leader. And they might just be able to get one of their own. If the Republicans in the Senate are tired of Trump and Trumpism, they could select Mitt Romney. They could select him as the leader of their caucus. I mean, he's still a deficit hawk. Well, they could select that guy, Bill Cassidy, who seems like a reasonable guy. Talk like a reasonable guy today. I mean, maybe they'll want a reasonable guy. I don't know. That's probably too much to hope for. Anyway, it turns out that there's a new plan. There's also some other talking going on. It turns out Nancy Pelosi and Mnuchin spoke by telephone today for the first time since October. They reportedly discussed coronavirus relief and the government funding bill, with the secretary saying the White House wants to avoid a shutdown and would prefer to pass a full appropriations bill rather than another short-term continuing resolution. After the call, Pelosi released a brief statement citing progress in the funding talks while calling for action on the coronavirus relief bill, saying that having additional COVID relief is long overdue and must be passed in this lame duck session. And McConnell circulated a new plan, saying, quote, "We just don't have time to waste time. We have a couple of weeks left here," said Mitch. He circulated a coronavirus plan that's considerably smaller than the bipartisan proposal released earlier in the day, in effect rejecting the centrist effort while defining what he is willing to accept in a targeted relief bill. So he continues to say, fuck you to everybody. Okay. And that's what, is going on in his talking to people. But there was also a word from the left, which must have been immediately after the big announcement from the so-called problem-solving caucus of both the House and the Senate. And that word came from one of our favorite Congress people, Rashida Tlaib. And this is an article by Common Dreams. And if you will allow me to, thank you all for being here, continuing to be here, by the way. I am very pleased you have stayed here this long. Anyway, Rashida said, or the headline says, Tlaib says lack of popular stimulus checks in bipartisan relief plan shows, quote, disconnect, quote unquote, between the Senate and the people. Well, of course it shows a disconnect. I mean, Mitt Romney, he's the person who said 47% of the American people were what? Oh, yeah, takers. And only 53% were givers or creators. I forget what term he used. That was a really out-of-touch remark. Then he also referred to binders full of women that he had, that he was considering for his cabinet. The binders full of women remark also pointed up how disconnected he was. There's no reason to believe he got any more connected since 2012. After all, he's still been cloistered in the mansions that he owns. And Rashida slammed a new bipartisan coronavirus relief proposal is out of touch with the needs and desires of the U.S. public over the plan's exclusion of another round of direct stimulus payments, a form of aid that's overwhelmingly popular among Americans across the political spectrum. Don't these people ever consult the freaking opinion polls? Quote, the fact that no stimulus checks is on this list shows the disconnect of the Senate with people on the ground. She tweeted Tuesday, in response to a summary of what the $908 billion proposal does not include. A leading supporter of a far more ambitious plan to provide $1,000 a month every person in the United States, but Tlaib pointed to, well, as long as the coronavirus is going on, she wants $2,000 per month, folks. She wants $2,000 per month. That's the ABC Act. Tlaib pointed to a September Gallup survey showing 70% of Americans, 82% of Democrats, 64% of Republicans, and 66% of independents believe the federal government should send out another one-time economic impact payment. 64% of Republicans, 66% of independents, 82% of Democrats. What are these people doing? There may not be bipartisan support for an additional check, she says, but there is support outside of Congress. 7 out of 10 want direct payments. She tweeted and cited the Gallup poll. Jeff Stein tweeted, details fluid would likely include $300 a week for UI, $300B for PPP, $250B for state and local, a temporary liability shield, and $50B for health vaccine distribution, and no stimulus checks 2.0. That was according to the Washington Post article. Okay. So this, of course, is $300 per week federal boost, okay, to unemployment. Was just half of the highly effective $600 per week benefit the GOP let expire at the end of July. The GOP let expire. It's true. True. Mitch McConnell let that expire. The plan, which is yet to be finalized, was introduced Tuesday morning by Senators Joe Manchin, Mitt Romney, Susan Collins, Angus King, Mark Warner, Bill Cassidy, Jeanne Shaheen, Lisa Murkowski, Maggie Hassan, House members of the Problem Solvers Caucus. On top of relief, oh, by the way, one of the Problem Solvers Caucus people who was in on this was Abigail Spanberger, she who believes that the squad is hurting the Democratic Party. On top of relief funding, the bipartisan proposal also calls for a 6-month liability shield for corporations, a longtime priority of Republicans that progressive lawmakers, worker and consumer advocates, and small businesses have decried as a green light for large companies to recklessly expose their employees and customers to the coronavirus. The proposed temporary liability shield is a permission slip for corporations to fail to protect their workers from the spread of COVID-19. Of course, okay, I told you that as well. Everybody, okay, is saying that. And Sirota, okay, and Julia Roth characterized, okay, the liability shield as a holiday season gift for corporate donors that would strip frontline workers of the last remaining legal tool to protect themselves in the workplace. Given the costs of doing nothing in the face of dire economic circumstances and a surging pandemic, some progressives stress the importance of passing additional coronavirus relief before the end of the year, even if the legislative package under consideration is flawed and inadequate. Quote, this is not stimulus and more will be needed later, but immediate relief is needed now, Sarah Nelson said. That's what the senators are talking about. We cannot wait. And she's right. Sarah's right. But Sarah, what about the workers who are going to be exposed to coronavirus by Amazon? What are they supposed to do? I know the trade-off is a very difficult one. But we have no reason to expose people. We have no right to expose people to the coronavirus without any form of legal recourse by taking away the normal legal protections that they would have in any situation in order to get this, okay, from Mitch McConnell. And the Rockefeller Foundation, by the way, the Rockefeller Foundation was supporting, okay, Flying with Sarah says we can't afford a pared down relief package. We need real relief that is well over $2 trillion. If we don't get relief to people, we're going to fall into a ditch, unquote. Sarah Nelson's right, of course. And the Rockefeller Foundation is in support, okay, of Sarah Nelson. But they say we need to go big on COVID response. But I also want to be clear, we need emergency relief now. The bipartisan group of senators working on emergency relief and doing what's absolutely necessary. Then in January, we fight for the full package from higher ground. A little higher ground. We don't know how high the ground will be in January yet. That's going to depend on what goes on in Georgia. House Democrats want to enact a COVID relief bill for working families. We want another round of stimulus checks. We want to extend unemployment insurance benefits. If we don't help the Raphael Warnock and Jon Ossoff win in Georgia, Mitch McConnell will keep standing in our way. In a statement, Nelson voiced agreement with Biden that a lame duck relief bill is not and cannot be the last COVID package. Quote, but American workers, the U.S. economy are teetering on the brink of disaster. We cannot afford weeks or months long without federal rescue aid. The day after Christmas, 12 million workers will lose access to any unemployment benefits, and as many as 40 million will be put at risk of eviction. The utilities will be cut off. Student loan payments resume. Coronavirus paid leave ends. Bread lines that already stretch miles will grow longer. The crisis is bigger than the previous economic crisis of the last 100 years combined. K. Nelson added, quote, we need to act like it. Sarah Nelson is great. She's absolutely great. But I don't know how to compromise the liability thing. That really, really, really sticks in my craw. So that's it. That's all I have for tonight. It can't be postponed until tomorrow. And I know I kept you a long time. Okay, I hope you've liked it. Sweep the 2 Georgia seats? Probably not. I agree. Probably not. But going back to the beginning on this, I've got comments from 9:52 on. There were probably some before 9:51, but it's not showing here on my StreamYard. I don't know. Jeremiah's scenario, I'm not sure what Evelyn is talking about there. Alva says, Evelina Pont, I don't think it's very far off. Kay says, I heard today net neutrality might be back soon. Oh, I don't know. I don't know if it'll be back soon. Remember, Trump is about to appoint somebody to the FCC. I don't know if he can be directly fired by the new administration. If he could, I'd be for that, but I don't know if that's possible to do. I mean, maybe Biden would be able to expand the FCC and court pack the guy. Steve Wolfbrand says, Fudge versus Fink? No. Fudge versus Heidi Heitkamp, who is a Fink. Alva says Google is a faction of the CIA, probably the faction opposed to the HRC DNC Russiagating ploy. Evelina says, a shocking observation you make. Think so, laugh out loud? Steve says, stupid junk at TYT thinks Neera is wonderful. TYT really sucks. I don't think he thinks she's wonderful. I don't think that's what I heard from him today. Why do you think you heard that from him today? I mean, I thought he was pretty pissed at the appointment, okay, of Neera. Anyway, I saw a little bit of that. I don't often watch too much TYT because it's a little too right wing for my taste, but there it is. Ivor says, Evelina Pont, Assange said it years ago, before Russia Gates, of course, but Google, Facebook, and Yahoo are all CIA. They're all in part supported by CIA. They're not quite CIA. Evelina says, we shouldn't all be peeved by Biden's pick. It's not like he's being incoherent. God bless you, honey. Alvaro says, hate that grimy snake. Evelina says, Avril Mano, okay. Steve says, what exactly is BlackRock? Sounds like Blackwater, the mercenary company. No. What BlackRock is okay, it's an investment company that manages $7 trillion of money and makes various kinds of investments around the world. I think it does hedge fund work, okay, as well. They are now the biggest company of their kind, okay, in the world, managing $7 trillion worth of assets. Steve Gonzo says, so is Gucci for 2.0. Anyway, look up BlackRock investments, Steve. There'll be an awful lot of crap, okay, on BlackRock. Kay says, try $676 a month Social Security. Yeah, I know. That's awfully tough. Evelina says, it sucks. Kay says, yes, it does. I don't know how you do it, Kay. It would be impossible. I mean, for us, okay, it would be impossible. We just have to leave this area. We couldn't afford to live in this area. Steve says, well, of course, as well, okay, as MSM. Evelyn says, Steve Wolfbrand. So what isn't the CIA a faction? That's a good point. Evelina says, in on, I should say. And Kay says, women and other low-wage workers get screwed on SS2, I know. And Avril says that Tandon is a libertarian. No, Tandon doesn't appear. No, I think it's fair to say Tandon is a neoliberal insofar as she has, okay, an ideology. Her main ideology seems to be the quest for power. That's what she seems to be motivated by. I would not say she's a libertarian at all. Kay says, Avro, she belongs to whoever is paying her off the time. That's absolutely correct, I think. Steve Wolfbrand said, hearing that Trump could announce his run for 2024 during Biden's inauguration, laugh out loud. Barbara Wernick says, no trust fund. It's a rouse. New money every month. No FICA needed. That's right. Absolutely. Absolutely. We could have new money every month with no FICA needed. All you have to do is fund it with trillion-dollar coins or with overt congressional financing. I've made both of these proposals in the past. Kay says, my old friends from North Carolina keep asking me to come back there again. With Medicare for all and Social Security expansion, I could. And Evelina says, is Neera of Indian descent? I wonder, yes. Indian from India. She is of Indian descent, as is Kamala Harris, of course. And Evelina Ponce has some icons there that I can't read because they don't show up on StreamYard. Alvaro Romano says, yeah, I bet she is. And Evelyn says, Avromano, like Kamala and that awful Tory minister in the UK, laugh out loud. Avril says, usually unreasonably conservative. Evelina says, Avril Mono noticed that too. Evelina says, must be the caste system. No, I don't think so. I think Neera Tanden, based on her accent, was probably educated here. Is probably a product of our school systems, might even have been born here, and probably doesn't have much first-hand contact with the caste system. Barbara Wernick says, right, no unintentional point being made. Avril says, HRC is behind the Tandon insults. Probably yeah, Avril, probably HRC is behind the Tandon insult. But the point is, HRC had to get to Biden to suggest that he appoint her as OMB director. The question is, why did the Biden transition team go that way? There's no evidence she's even going to be a good manager, of OMB, and every evidence that she won't be, because she was quite short of management smarts when she directed CAP. She was very good at a fundraiser, but in OMB, she doesn't have to be a fundraiser. There, she has to be a manager, get products out, get budgets out on time. And they got to be good. Evelyn says, this is why some peeps don't like women, but we're not all that way. Why do some peeps not like women? That's a funny generalization, Evelina, coming from you. Kay says, I doubt Tandon will get confirmed anyway. Yeah, the Republicans are really, really, really down on her. And I would say, if confirmation involved the House, she would definitely be defeated, because all the Republicans would vote against her, and a good many Democrats, 40 or 50 Democrats in the House, would vote against her too, even if Nancy Pelosi wanted her. She never get through the House, but she only has to get through the Senate. So that's a different thing. That's a different thing. There you have to figure who among the senators would be likely to vote against her. Well, if I thought it was likely, if we're talking likely, I would say only Bernie Sanders. Other possibilities are probably Jeff Merkley. He's probably one possibility. I can't think of any other ready possibility, though. Someone I thought was probably a possibility was Sherrod Brown, and he's already said that he would not vote against her, which made me quite unhappy this morning when he immediately folded. Now, I didn't have any faith that Warren would say she would vote against her, and I was right about that, because Warren immediately came out and said, no, I'm going to vote to confirm her. I admire her. I like her. God. Which again proves that Warren is not a progressive. Avril says, surprise, dude didn't have her arrested. Well, he was working for her at the time, and she was the director of CAP. I don't know. I don't think she was actually director of CAP at the time. I think it was Podesta who was the director at the time. But she was like the second in command or something there then. Evelina says, hope you're right, Kay. And Kay says, Repugs hate her and progressives don't like her either, so I doubt it. But as I say, there's only one progressive in the Senate. The question is, if he decides, because somehow his committee chairmanship, Kay, is involved, if he decides not to oppose her, I don't know if any other senator that calls himself a progressive would then turn around and vote against her. Now, maybe Bernie could get that done on the side, but I don't know who it might be. Sheldon Whitehouse, Jeff Merkley. Those are the only two, I can think of. I mean, I can't see Dick Durbin doing it. I can't. I can't see the other senators from the Midwestern states. Or maybe Gary Peters might be a possibility. I don't think Debbie Stabenow, would vote against her. But Gary Peters has a reputation as a quiet progressive who doesn't make much noise. Maybe the attitudes of Neera Tanden have pissed him off, and he'll decide, to vote against her. Even if one Democrat, decides to go over to the other side, in a 50-50 Congress or 50-50 Senate, that would roll it over to the other side. Evelina says, Tasmanian devil, laugh out loud. Evelina says, no offense to the little critters. Steve Wolfman says, the cartoon. We know we can't vote our way out of this. We have to strategize. Alva says, right. That's why Dr. Joe is recommending supporting the third party to the utmost of Plan B. I think that's been the plan really for some time. Insofar as some progressives have been holding their fire, and I don't even think I've been completely holding my fire. I've certainly been continuously critical, of Biden. But I certainly think the time is here, as Ryan Cooper says, the time is here of really, really opposing and calling attention to every foul thing that occurs in the run-up to this administration and in the administration itself. And what goes along with that is supporting that third party to the utmost. Of course, we have to support also progressives inside the Democratic Party. I mean, real progressives, not people who label themselves progressives, but people who vote progressive. We have to support them inside of the Democratic Party too, because the right strategy is an inside-outside strategy. That's what it is. So the inside people talk to the outside people, talk to the party and say, look, the outside people are starting to eat your lunch. The only way you're going to be able to win this is to come over to our side. That's a dynamic we have to set up, for the long run. Kay says, good, Our Revolution live stream tonight, right before this one. Evelina says, not sure they can govern themselves out of this mess either. Alva says, Our Revolution's establishment, from what I remember. I don't think they're establishment. I think they're establishment Bernie. Insofar as Bernie is collaborating with the establishment, they will collaborate, with the establishment, because they're basically still run by Bernie. Kay says, I love the movement for a People's Party. I think the movement for a People's Party is now the People's Party, Kay. I think they selected a name, and I think there's been enough time for Nick to incorporate it. So
they can go online.
I think now we can say we love the People's Party.
They can go online now and look up their whole thing.
Right. Bonnie says that you can go online and look up the whole thing now, which, but actually you've been able to do this for a very long period of time. So you can get the actual state of progress from the MPP site. Steve Wolfman, people in my company are getting sick with COVID. It's getting thick out here in LA. I know it's getting thick out there, in LA. It's getting thick everywhere. It's getting thick here too. I mean, you can see it getting thick. Well, one thing that's happening to make it thick is because we're getting into the season now, the shopping season, the Christmas season, stuff like that, the crowds in the stores are much higher now. I mean, I don't want to walk into a grocery store now without a double mask on. Wear a mask and wear face shields. Come back to the car, immediately sanitize. I'm just very, very careful. Go out as little as possible, anywhere. don't get near other people. I mean, we're so close. I mean, we got like maybe 4 or 5 months to get through. Okay, in our case, if that, I want to get through those 4 or 5 months. I want to live through this.
Me too.
And Bonnie wants to live through this too. We both want to live through this. That's our priority right now. No unnecessary risks to be undertaken. Kay says, you need to get out of there, Steve. So sorry to hear. Steve Gonzo says the People's Party filed its first state election qualification. Thank you, Steve Gonzo. Yeah. So they're official now.
You can volunteer too.
Yeah, I think that they know you could always volunteer, even for the movement of People's Party. Steve Wolfbrand says, me too, Kay. Evelina Pond says, hey, the Dakotas are doing badly. Read 1 in 800 dying. 1 in 1,000, K in the other. Which is South Dakota? Because South Dakota is the one who has the nutty governor, who held she held the super spreader event that killing a lot of people in the Midwest. Evelina Pond says, the murderous Noam, Christy Noam. And Barbara Wernick says, okay, and FDR, I think not. I think not too, Barbara. I think not too. The Tandon appointment seems to be just an insult to burners with no hope of actually succeeding. Well, it can't be just that because OMB is an important spot. So he must have believed, or the Biden transition team must have believed, that she would be able to perform in the position. I think they're wrong. I think she's going to prove incompetent in that particular position. And if they appointed her just to insult Bernie, they will regret it later because I don't think she can hack that position. It takes somebody with some chops. I mean, you got to have a smart person. A smart person who can handle the computing and the supervision of it, okay, and the comprehensive budgeting, turning the policies, okay, into budgets. That is not Neera Tanden. Just listen to her talk sometime. She's all over the place. She's a BSer. Then listen to Jack Lew talk. Jack Lew is not a big BSer. He's always on top, okay, of everything. I mean, I don't like his policies. I don't like what he tried to do. But that is one competent fellow. Steve Wolfbrand says Texas is very bad as well. Kay says the DNC never gets it. Steve says Texas is very bad as well. El Paso is a hellhole. Alvaro says, Evelina Pont, I probably misspelled the bitch's last name, but meaning the governor of South Dakota. I believe that you spelled it right. I think it's Noem, as I recall. And Antonio Calhouse says BlackRock is an official black pool, like in a chart, Antonio Calhouse said. Kay says BlackRock is the black hole where all the money goes. Antonio says, thank you, Joseph Firestone. Thank you for coming, Antonio. Alvaro says, so Mitch turned down the bipartisan COVID recovery today. You just can't make his cruelty up. Well, he might not have a choice. As I said, there are 4 Republican senators there. If they feel strongly enough about it, what they can do over the next few days is they can get on the floor of the Senate with all the Democrats, grab control of the Senate, and they can pass that bill. If they get a bill, they can pass that bill. It depends on if they want. Of course, I'm a deficit out. Okay, I mean, I'm an MMTer through and through. We are the deficit owls as defined by Stephanie Kelton. She was the one who originally created the deficit hawk of the deficit dove and deficit owl imagery. I loved it when she did that. That was great. That was great. And Avril says, yeah, there's no deficit owls because fucking Bernie still taps taxes, fund spending. Yeah, he never got off that. He never got off playing the progressive give up formula, Bernie did. Bernie's the progressive give up guy. He knows that formula real well. Antonio Calhoun said she is hot. Evelina says, you are a deficit owl, Dr. Joe. He says, you. She says, you are a deficit owl. And Avril says, yaps. Correction. Evelina says, Antonio Calhoun, personality doesn't matter, right? Kay says, exactly. And Avril says, Evelina Pont, nor does devastating the poor and elderly, apparently. Evelina says, Avril Mano, it's a man thing, I guess. Avril Mano says, Evelina Pont, why I don't respect shallow buffoonery. Evelina says, Avril Mano, they compartmentalize you, know. Kay says, Evelina, this country is so corrupt in so many ways. If we could get, if we could get the progressives in, it will take many years to clean up the mess. No, it won't. No, it won't take many years. It'll probably take a full term to clean up the mess. But if we had the Senate and we had the House, and progressives were in control of both and in control of the presidency, we could clean it up within 4 years, I'm sure, because we can go right by the Supreme Court. We can either pack the Supreme Court or we can prohibit the Supreme Court from reviewing the bills we passed. Antonio Cal says, she must be a little perv like HRC, quote unquote. Perv is, quote unquote. I make no suppositions about that. Avril says, Evelina Pont, small minds do lack in compartments. So much is true. Steve says, just one foolish male. Let it go. Avril says, centrists got shut down. Kay says, we need to teach civics again in high school. They stopped that decades ago. Antonio says, catching up here, and he linked to the Fiscal Times, which I already linked to, okay, in the description. Avril says, why do you insist on posting articles that are already in the post heading? He's just trying to help out. Evelina Pont says, Avril Mano, something to do with the isthmus between the two brains. Antonio says, I think the stimulus pact for the Eurozone was 7 trillion euros, but I did not get anything, still with less than 200 euros. In the U.S., at least they send $1,200, and you can ask for more. Yeah, but we evidently can't get it, even though we've been asking for months and months and months. Avril says, yeah. One head can't function, think at least, when the other head is all the blood supply. I've heard it all before. Steve says, I'm still living on that $1,200 check from 6 months ago. We all are, Steve. Kay says, teach civics to young people so they can learn to change things or at least try to. Steve says, sometimes the little head wins, sadly. Kay says, too many little heads these days, and that is a problem. Evelina says, Avril Mano, no, something to do with connections or lack thereof. Avril says, okay, gotcha. Kay says, Prof from Oberlin U here in Ohio, Progressive U, I know it is speaking at the Bioneers Fest this week, and he said that. I believe that. And Kay says, I guess you have a better idea, Avril. Shake my head. Avril says, laughing at myself because I initially misread that as Beer Fest, and I know you like to drink, laugh out loud. Kay says, laugh out loud. Okay, then. Steve says, my neighborhood is very tourist dependent in my job. We are essential and have to enter homes of customers who refuse to wear masks. It sucks. Oh, my God. That's awful. Avril says, invest in a wearable oxygen tank and a quality oxygen mask. I would. And Steve says, how long are you compromised by them in the house? But Kay says, I hate Romney, Avril Mono. And Steve says, Avril Mono will just move to the moon. Steve Wolfbrand said 15 to 30 minutes. Steve said, I'm a manager, but my crew does this. Steve Wolfbrand, I'd go with the cheaper option of the wearable oxygen tank mask first, then rent a rocket later. Steve Gunter says, that's fucked up. Kay says, we love you, Joe, and each other too. Thank you, Kay. And Antonio says, present. And links to Rashida. Avril says, wouldn't that be a great business venture during COVID? Rentable, wearable, personalized oxygen mask and supplies that you can wear to the store or doctor's office, etc. I don't know, but once you have to,
If there's some kind of filter on it.
yeah, you'd have to have some way of changing the way you get the oxygen. And Steve says Donald Trump's share of the U.S. vote just fell to 46.9%. He's now failed to crack 47% of either of his runs for president. Romney got 47.2% in 2012. Hillary Clinton got 48.2% in 2016. Yeah, and she got more than Donald Trump in 2016 also. Steve Wolfbrand said, Mitt wears the secret underwear. The secret underwear? What's that about?
Mormon.
Oh, yeah, he's Mormon, right? Right, Bonnie recognized that quickly. He is Mormon, yeah. Antonio Calhouse said, Speaker.gov newsroom 12125. Thanks for that link. I'm not sure what you were linking to, but thanks for that link, Antonio. Avril says their constituents must have gotten into their case when they went home for Thanksgiving again without doing a damn thing for the public, while suffering healthcare workers such as lack of PPEs. He says, I like the Facebook page called the Mitch McConnell Retirement Committee, laugh out loud. They're out of Kentucky. It's terrible they lost the fight to retire Mitch. Probably because they backed the wrong horse or the wrong lady. Avril Mono says, fall into a ditch. She means mass COVID graves coming soon. She does. He says, Amazon workers should strike. Chris Small is a hero. There's others. Yeah, I agree. Amazon workers should strike. Avril says, Bonnie, do you have some vitamin C on hand? Yeah, we got lots of vitamin C. I can tell you that. We got lots of vitamin C. But we also have vitamin E, lots of vitamin E. Sorry, folks. Chris Moore's a hero. That's where I ended up. Then I scrolled down too fast. Okay, sweep the 2 Georgia seats, probably not, as I said before. Yeah, I agree, probably not. But they have to try. Kay says there have been strikes in several cities in the last few days. Avril says Mitch is killing everybody. Steve Gonzo said the French fried the country and got concessions. Steve Gonzo says, Kay says, we love it, Joe. Thank you, Kay. And Antonio Cala said, on the 12th day of Christmas, we got stimulus checks. Antonio Calhouse says, God bless. Steve Wolfbrand says, check Jimmy Dore on Tandon and Jenk. Okay, Jenk congratulated her. He did. That asshole. Avril says, I apologize. I thought BlackRock and Blackwater were affiliated. Learned something new. Well, they might be affiliated behind the scenes. We don't know. I think Blackwater changed its name to XI. I mean, that's Eric Prince's place. Who's Eric Prince? He is Betsy DeVos's brother. That's who he is. Who is Betsy DeVos? She's still the Secretary of Education. She should only be cursed forever.
I think she takes the black kids out of the schools.
Antonio Calhoun gives a link to the Wikipedia entry for BlackRock. And then says, interesting, and he gives a link to AmericanBanker.com. 11th hour pick to run OCC. Complicates Biden regulatory agenda. That was it. The OCC, yes. And Linda Tamburini Smith says Trump can't understand how Biden beat him so badly. Here are 360 million reasons. Biden's small dollar fundraising operation shows a record level of grassroots support. We can thank Bernie Sanders for that. He can thank Bernie Sanders for that. As Donald Trump and his elder sons continue to toss out outlandish claims the election was rigged, the president has repeatedly returned to the argument that fraud must have occurred because Joe Biden couldn't have legitimately received the record-breaking 80 million votes. He's also got Bernie Sanders to thank for that. The Trumps seem intent on measuring a candidate. Yes. Alvaro says, Antonio Calhoun, knock it the fuck off. Your condescension is annoying. It's not condescension. Antonio's just trying to be helpful. Relax, Alvaro. He's not being condescending. Antonio's a good guy. Kay says, Steve, Cenk needs to go, says Kay. Kay says, Brown is as progressive as Ohio Dems get. That's why Ohio sucks so bad, says Kay. Well, to be fair to Sherrod Brown, how many senators in the United States are more progressive than Sherrod Brown? I mean, is he not in the top 5? I mean, from that standpoint, I don't think the 2 senators from Washington are more progressive than he is. I certainly don't think Harris, was more progressive. And Feinstein, is certainly not. The Arizona senators are certainly not. The Colorado senators were not. Maybe Gary Peters, in Michigan. Maybe he's more progressive. Maybe not, though. I don't really think he is. Certainly Debbie Stabenow is not. Certainly Senator Casey in Pennsylvania, he's not. And the New York senators are certainly not more progressive than Sherrod. Ed Markey is more progressive. Oh, maybe Ed Markey could vote against Neera. Maybe he could stand in for Bernie and vote against Neera. Boy, the progressives would love that. I mean, he just won his seat. He could vote against Neera Tanden. Yeah, that's good. Yeah. But Ed Markey, Bernie Sanders, Jeff Merkley. After that, I'm having trouble finding anyone more progressive than Sherrod Brown, Kay. Evelina says, the likes of so many awful women in top government positions is why some peeps don't like women, Dr. Joe. Well, I'll tell you why. That's because the males in the top spots in government insist on elevating the awful women, the really great women, they don't like. Because the really great women are too forward. That's why. I mean, to become a woman leader in the Republican Party, you have to be a real skunk. Like like Marsha Blackburn, for example. Well, Antonio says, it helps to keep track of things. Do not be mean. I am an old fart. Antonio. And Avro says, Antonio Cal, how far away? Nancy Gosling. Blackmar says, agree with you. Thanks. Stay healthy. And Steve says, can we now change our party affiliation to People's Party? Sure. I think we now can.
Yes, we can. I did today.
Oh, Bonnie says she did today. She changed her affiliation to the People's Party. Kay says, I'm getting to the point. I don't know whether I'm more afraid to live through it or to die and be done with this whole mess of a country. Kay, fight, 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 fight to live. All the rest of us are going to fight to live too. Antonio said, we're close to the vaccine now. We only have to wait a little longer and stay alive and well. A mask is better than a ventilator. At home is better than a hospital. Social distancing is better than distancing from life. Righto, righto. Avrobano says, probably not in Georgia just yet, since the important election to neutralize Mitch is coming up in January. Steve says, you'll be okay, Kay. We love you. Kay says, love you guys back, Steve. Avro says, Bonnie, do you have some vitamin C on hand? Yes, we have lots of vitamin C. Steve Gonzo says, Trump was calling Ducey as he was signing the certification. I know, and Ducey still signed the certification. Trump can only get so far. Ohio GOP Senator Portman blasts tweets from Biden's pick for budget post. Won't address Donald Trump's. Portman says he hopes Biden reconsiders nomination of Neera Tanden as OBM director because she's so partisan. Right. And Antonio says, Joseph Firestone, thank you for reading for us and commenting. Your long view and expertise are key. And Steve says D3 and zinc doc. Yeah, zinc is said also to be very important. And Alfred says, I like the vitamin C with rose hips, dries the sinus issue right up. We have vitamin C with rose hips, yes. And Antonio says vitamin C and zinc. The vitamin E is good for cartilage. Vitamin E is said to be protection from COVID. By John Campbell has done quite a lot of investigation of this, and he believes it's a real preventative, for COVID. And we've been taking it. Well, we always took some of it, but we have upped what we take to 6,000 units a day, and so far, at least, with all the other precautions we're taking, we managed to avoid the COVID. Of course, that's no proof, of course. But Antonio, Eric Prince lives in Dubai, and he went to Hillsdale College. And Antonio gives us a link to Eric Prince. Steve Wolfbrandt says, Mormons believe there'll be kings of other planets, probably no weirder, than other religions. And Kay says, that doesn't make Brown great. No, yeah, you're right. It doesn't make him great. But we have to have a little sympathy when he's number 4 or 5 in the Senate. I mean, think of it. You've got the 4th or 5th best Democratic senator in the whole union. That's something, anyway. Senate Banking Committee. Steve says, I'll put my money behind Kshama. She's got the biggest balls. she certainly does. Avril says, why? Because she's a man? I don't think she is at all. Antonio says, after Bernie, Leahy is probably the best. No, I don't think Leahy is as progressive as Sherrod Brown, not when it comes to economics. Okay, and I'm not sure that's true also when it comes to green stuff. I think Lacey, that but Leahy is strong when it comes to judiciary questions, but civil liberties, civil rights, but things like that. Certainly Keynesian, okay, when it comes to economics, has been for a long time. He's also got guts. Steve Wolfbrand says, no, she's a woman with huge balls. She's a hero. I agree. She is. Vitamin C rose hips, Solgar, a good brand. Yeah, I have another brand, but I think it's Kirkland. Mine is Kirkland. Kay says, when I was a child, my mom took me to the doctor for shots of zinc. Alva says, vitamin E makes me bleed internally. Can't fool with it. Oh, that's terrible, Alva. Steve says, laugh out loud. Ducey sent Trump straight to voicemail while streaming live. Steve Wolfbrand, take some melatonin. We take melatonin. That's something we take every night. Melatonin. That's been regulating our biological clocks for a long time. Okay, folks, I've done it. It's 12:01 a.m. I've been on for about 3 hours. So that's all for tonight. I'll be back tomorrow night at 9 o'clock. I will try to control the amount, okay, of news I give. Steve Gonzo says you could hear the Hail to the Chief ringtone. Oh, that's awesome. That's amazing. Alvaro says we dropped from 85 yesterday to 65 degrees today. Dangerous weather, especially during COVID. And Dolores Pierce says, thank you and good night all. Well, thank you, Dolores. Thank you for being here. And Steve Wolfbrand says, good night. Good night, everybody. I'm ending the broadcast.